Good morning, everyone. Happy weekend to you. I'm meteorologist Ted Keller. We're going to talk about some severe thunderstorm risks for the next couple of days. And really, it's focused on today, tomorrow, and maybe a little bit on Monday before it kind of takes a break again, I think, with the jet stream that was blocking severe thunderstorms breaking down this weekend and then kind of returning to that same mode. And we'll talk in greater detail about that here in a second. Let's start this day by day, though. Here's Saturday's outlook, a level 1 and 2 issued by the Storm Prediction Center. Covers a lot of ground from Montana all the way down to Texas. This is assumed to be dry line activity here, very conditional. I think the greatest threat of overall severe weather of all modes is probably right here. We'll show you all that. I broadcast this from Southwest Missouri. There could be a hail producer that happens in our part of the world later on today. Again, a very conditional threat and not very widespread. And I don't think the hail will be particularly large, but we're kind of sensitized to it here in Springfield after that hailstorm several weeks back. So on the just zooming in on this, the slight risk, as it's called, the yellow, runs from northern Oklahoma back into South Dakota. And there is a tornado risk that has been amped up a little bit for today, higher, and has shifted around since the overnight runs. So now we have a 5% tornado risk in here from North Platte southward to Hays, Kansas, and that arc right there where we have an upper level system coming out, and I'll show you that here in a minute. And I think a pretty favorable wind profile here, a turning of the winds, that'll be good, and somewhat of a dry line, not real sharp, but enough to probably fire off a couple of supercells in this area here. There's an overall concern about supercell versus clustered thunderstorms. I'll show you why in a minute. But on the intensity side of this, sometimes they don't issue an intensity at all, which means they think they're all going to be pretty weak tornadoes. But when they go to level 1, like this, intensity 1, that means, they're saying somewhere the bulk of it's certainly going to be in the EF0 to EF1 category, but just kind of an outside chance, not something, to be ignored for an EF2 somewhere in there as well. On NATOcast, they certainly have been and continue to be emphasizing the panhandle of Nebraska, sort of, right, actually this is, but you can see where it is, and then maybe a small chunk of Colorado. Then this arm here has been extending slowly here. If I were to consider a storm chase today, it would be out here. I'm not up early enough to get to here, so that's not going to happen probably. But I'm watching this. I don't know. I'd have to just be convinced. I think tomorrow is a better day, to be honest, closer to. But again, StormNet, another learning model, has always put North Platte in that area in a higher tornado risk, and this would be true. This is the 7 to 8 o'clock hour tonight, so that's interesting, right around dark, just getting into dusk. Severe hail risk is 15%, worth mentioning. And in the intensity side, you could get some 2-inch hail, up to 2-inch hail in here, a high probability there of that happening, but it would be in this area here. And again, these don't always match because the colors are the probability of severe hail, which is 1 inch or greater. And then this hatched area says this is what we think the spread on intensity size, in other words, of the hail will be. And they don't match because what this is saying is where you're in a hatched area, it means you have a lower probability but same likelihood of a size, if that makes sense. And NATOcast does do a hail risk parameter too, and they put a significant, 10% chance of 2-inch or greater in this area from North Platte down into central Kansas, and a 30% risk of hail. So they're a little bit more optimistic about hail production. On the wind side, nothing really to get too excited about, although the SPC did say that down into this lower risk area, the intensity could be about the same if for any thunderstorms that managed to pop through there along the dry line. And then on CSU's outlook for tornadoes, this makes sense, Nebraska and western South Dakota. And again, the arm of that has just kind of slowly crept down into Kansas over the last couple of days. They're more excited about hail on this outlook than they are about wind, and that is pretty consistent. So here's what's going on. The 500 millibar flow, I think I grabbed this, at 6 o'clock tonight. So there's this kind of a broad shortwave, and embedded in this shortwave are little speed maximum areas, like here and here and here. And these are all right on the threshold of being enough bulk shear, which is the difference in wind between the surface roughly and this level roughly. So if you look at that for that same time, if it's colored that darker blue, it's plausible. It could happen. It's not a widespread synoptic kind of thing that applies to this entire area, but it does happen in pockets. That's because we have that kind of batched together wind maximum area, and so this is where I think the best rotation for low-level storms will be. But I don't think this can be discounted either if the storm mode is supercell. If it's not supercell and it's just cluster, it's going to be very hard to get a tornado or find one in that type of environment. Cape, no problem. We've got enough instability to do the job here. In fact, if you look at those purple colors, they're in the 4,000 range there in central Kansas. And you can already see when I grab this at 6, there's some thunderstorms forming right there that are interrupting the flow. And if I show you an image of that, I think this one was grabbed at 6 or 5. I can't remember which time here, but we already have what looks strongly to be clustered thunderstorms, some more indications of supercells up here. And yeah, it's kind of a messy mode. It's not quite there. I think if I were to decide to do it today, I'd probably pick this. I don't know if this is all that bad either. Again, you shouldn't rely on the simulated radar output, because it does change. But one thing I do when I analyze this is I look at several runs. And also, yeah, I was mentioning there might be a hailstorm or two in southwest Missouri. That kind of indicates that there. Then we'll go ahead to Sunday. Now, this is interesting because the severe thunderstorm risk is broadly on the marginal risk from North Dakota all the way down to the Ozarks to the Arkansas Missouri border. Includes Springfield and Kansas City, and the level 2 area, we'll zoom in on that, is up around Lincoln and Omaha and Sioux City, almost to Sioux Falls. Norfolk is in that too. The SPC paints the tornado risk at, I forgot to put the graphic on there, but that's 2% from St. Joe up to Omaha, all the way up to parts of South Dakota. That's interesting. Now, if I show you the StormNet view of that, they actually put the tornado risk from this period, the 12-hour period from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. on Sunday, centered more around Warrensburg, which is interesting because the SPC, there's very little overlap. Theirs is here, and this one puts it right here. So we'll see what happens here tomorrow. I just wanted to put that out there. And again, CSU is not really concerned about Missouri at all. In fact, they back up the tornado risk even more to the northwest than the SPC does. And they put a hail risk behind that too, wind risk not so much. Now on Monday, more of a broad brush marginal risk, but covering a lot of ground here. It's a lot of uncertainty. And when I see this, I think it is possible for, once we understand the upper level wind flow with this, that a slight risk will be possible in some of these pockets. We'll see what happens here. And so on Monday, we do have the severe weather risk being painted in a real broad brush fashion here, with no tornado risk showing up at all. So hail and wind, mostly hail, probably will show up. And then the outlooks beyond Monday are not impressive enough to show right now. There's really not that much going on, but I will say it does kind of shift north at first, and then it comes back into the central plains. But the risk levels are very low at this point, so I just chose not to put them up there. Supercell composite for today through the 5th is definitely emphasizing that area. Again, this graph kind of sums up the first 2 days, so there's really not much to this except for today and tomorrow, and then maybe some of this includes Monday. And then we go beyond that, though, and again, this thing has been bouncing around like a yo-yo. So for week 2, I've seen it here, and now it's back up here in the northern plains, which I think makes more sense to me. Week 3, the overall probabilities diminish and shift north, but again, the variability is going to be at its greatest when we're talking about a forecast that far into the future.